Good morning. Good afternoon. Just made it. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I'm Susan Edwards, the Executive Director and CEO of the Frist Center. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to this program. We're delighted that the artist Tina Barney will give us an artist's perspective. That means her own. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Robin and Richard Patton for their generous support for Tina Barney, the Europeans. I also want to gratefully acknowledge our government support from Metro Nashville Arts Commission, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts. All those agencies provide general operating support. Our greatest debt, of course, goes to Tina Barney. She's been a generous and professional colleague throughout the organization of her exhibition at the Frist, and on behalf of the entire staff, I want to thank her. Tina Barney's photography career began in the mid-1970s while living in Sun Valley, Idaho. She started photographing in color with a large format view camera just before returning to her home in New York City in 1983. For much of the 1980s and 1990s, Barney was photographing what she knew, her family and friends, as they went about their daily lives in affluent areas of Long Island, New York City, and New England. Barney was thus one of the first photographers to present color work on a scale so grand it rivaled most 20th century painting. Barney's work is in the permanent collections of numerous institutions, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, among many, many others. Her photographs were included in the 1987 Whitney Biennial. An exhibition of the Europeans was exhibited at the Barbican Art Gallery in London and later traveled to the Museum of Art, Salzburg. We are delighted to have the artist with us today. No one can tell us more about her life and career than Tina Barney. Please join me in welcoming Tina Barney.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. Got a modern microphone on me here. Well, first of all, thank you for having me to Nashville. I've been here once before. I'm here because I have very good friends that live here, and Susan Edwards was a friend of mine many years ago in New York City. And at that time, she wrote about me once, and I'll never forget it, because one of the thrills of being an artist is to have someone write about your work in a way that you never thought of before, that really teaches you something. It's a thrill beyond words. To have someone write about you and to have a show like this is even more a dream. This museum is such a jewel. You're all very lucky to have it. And to have my work in this context compared, and sort of paired up with Houghton Hall is very exciting and very, very interesting in itself. But I want to start off this talk, and I usually start off when I give these talks, telling you about myself, mostly because my work is so autobiographical. And everybody goes back and starts asking me questions about myself. I'd love to just skip right through that, but I'm not going to do that. I was born in New York City, and that's become a very rare thing in itself. My ancestors were born in New York City, and also my ancestors were art collectors, and that is one of the things that interests me so much, is what you inherit from your family that you hand down from generation to generation, whether your children are going to be interested in what their ancestors were interested in. And somehow that sort of happened in our family. My brother's interested in art. He showed me how to go about collecting art when we were very young. But I had a very brilliant art history teacher when I was 14 years old in the private school I went to in New York. And I think that person, that woman, Margareta Scolari, who was the wife of Alfred Barr, the first director of the Museum of Modern Art, was so brilliant that I, even today, remember the passion she had, and that she turned me on more than the art that I was surrounded by and grew up with in my home. Our parents never talked about art, but she's the one who really did the trick. I then went on to live in Florence when I was 19 years old because I wanted to study the Italian Renaissance. I came back, I went to college for about 4 months, didn't want to do that, and got married at the age of 20 had 2 kids by the age of 23, and that's when I started collecting photography. It's when most people had never heard of Ansel Adams or Edward Weston. I started buying photographs in New York City. There were only 2 galleries in New York City. You could buy these famous photographers for no more than $200, $300. I started in a very small way collecting, but right at that time, my husband of that time said, let's move out of New York. It's a terrible place to bring up children, and we moved to Sun Valley, Idaho. I really didn't know what was happening. Our 2 little kids, were with us. We went there. I had been there when I was a little girl, and I thought I was going to die of boredom. And there was an art center there, which saved my life. And I started taking photography classes, never for 1 second ever thinking of myself as an artist because my standards were so high. What was unique about this art center is that all the famous photographers in America came there to teach, and sometimes I was the only student because nobody else knew who they were. And most people in a ski resort are interested in photographing snow and skiers and sports. So that's when my education started, when I just had all these wonderful teachers coming into Sun Valley, very privately teaching me. But I never really took pictures in Sun Valley in the 10 years I lived there that were interesting at all. What I took was pictures that when I went back to Rhode Island to the summer resort that I lived in from the age of 21 to now, which is it's still my home, and I started realizing the huge difference between the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States. You know how you never really know very much, it's very hard to sort of understand where you come from unless you leave it, and I had never moved away from my home except for that 1 year going to school in Europe. And there were specific sort of things that I realized were so different. The way people dressed, the way they moved, the traditions they had, the rituals they had, the way they spoke to each other. So I started walking around with my Pentax camera in black and white. I learned how to print by myself in Sun Valley and made pictures like this. This is 1976. I made them 16 by 20 inches. And I go back to this picture because it's sometimes the beginning of an artist's sort of career or life. You do things that you never can get back to because they're so naive and so sort of unpremeditated. But there's a choreography to this picture that I'm very pleased with still. At this point, I was not telling people in the pictures to do something very specific. I can't remember if this family told me they took the American flag down that was in front of their house every night. But I was fascinated by rituals. For instance, going out and buying the Christmas tree, going out and getting the pumpkin, and whether people are really registering when they do those rituals, or are they just automatically doing it. So this is from 1976, and I sort of chopped the heads off people because I didn't want the viewer to look at the people's faces because they weren't about portraiture. The pictures were about gesture, about the spaces in between people. I think people in the East Coast are more reserved, they're more formal. But gestures, for instance, such as the way this young man is putting his hand in his pocket, that I knew was indigenous to the East Coast. Now, of course, what interests me too is, did he do that because he saw his father do it? Or did someone in a movie that he thought was cool do it? Or is he imitating the cooler older guys at school? The cigarette, the way the glass is being held. Also the seersucker suit. I knew with my kids growing up in Sun Valley, Idaho, they might not ever wear a suit and tie ever again, and especially not a seersucker suit. I also marked the fact that this is pre-Ralph Lauren. And everybody laughs about that, but I was very aware always of the fact that Ralph Lauren is a sociological phenomena in the history of America, maybe even the world, that we are so used to that I don't think we really realized how important he was, because he was describing a group of people in America that were very specific and that a lot of people wanted to be a lot alike. In about 1980, a teacher came to Sun Valley Art Center where I was studying for 10 years, and he taught me how to make color pictures. And I didn't think I was going to like doing that at all. I was so used to photographing in black and white, so I started, with a 35mm camera still and learned how to print in color, started making pictures like this. I sort of mark this photograph because I think, if I can remember correctly, it is the first time that I actually directed someone in a photograph for the purpose of making a narrative. I asked my son Phil to stand on that diving board. I asked Amy in the yellow towel to stand on the left. I asked Brian to stand on the right. I wanted to show that I thought that American families were too far apart, that they did not show enough affection, that they did not really notice each other or care about each other enough. And I wasn't pleased with the structure of this picture because I thought it was very stiff, but this was the beginning. The pictures still were small until this photograph. My teacher, Mark Klett, used a 4x5 view camera. It's the kind of camera you see with the bellows and the black thing that goes over the head of the photographer. The camera's on a tripod. I still, to this day, this picture was taken in 1982, used the same camera and the same lens. I have deviated by one lens difference, so when you do the math, 1982, 2015, same camera, same lens. What made the difference about that camera, what I wanted to do, and which I learned from my teacher, Mark Klett, is I wanted the quality of the photograph to hold up when I finally started making pictures 4x5 feet. This was historical in the history of photography, not only to make a picture that big, because Kodak hadn't invented paper that big until this time, but also when you blow a picture up, the quality of the focus starts to fall apart as you make it bigger, and I wanted to keep that focus. I also studied Italian Renaissanceian painting, Dutch 17th century painting, and read a lot about art theory. I wanted to create a space that would bring the viewer into the picture. I read a lot about color theory because I actually sort of wondered if you were wearing a blue or a red shirt, would that person stand out better in a picture than the other? But I would use devices such as this hammock as the Italian Renaissanceian painters used to, let me see if I can point this out. You see this? To bring the eye of the viewer into the center of the picture to say, I want you to notice these two kids back here. Because what I really want to say is I was always interested in the token loner and the fact that I think everybody is lonely. And look at this girl, she's by herself, but those two back there are having fun together. So this is 1982, Ada's hammock, and then I took this picture of my sister. This is called Beverly, Jill, and Polly. I go on to photograph my sister Jill for 30 years. I always compare it to, not that I'm comparing myself to Ingmar Bergman, Woody Allen, many directors in film that use the same actors over and over again because you get used to them, they understand you, you don't have to explain things, and you find the perfect recipe for the things that you're trying to do. There are many kind of characters, I'm going to call them, in my pictures, and this is from a body of work called Theater of Manners, 30 years of work about my family and friends, in which you will see the same characters repeated over and over again for 30 years. The movie Boyhood is so close to my heart because of what Linklater did in that movie. I'm interested in the same thing. So Beverly, Jill, and Polly, 1983, I asked Beverly to look at the magazine. I had no idea how radical this picture was going to be because people pointed out that this was a black woman. What was I talking about? That it was a racial picture. I was so clueless, I had no idea that I was doing that. Now, from now on, 1982 to now, I make my pictures the same size you see here in the gallery, 4x5 feet. I stay with that size and maybe one size smaller because I feel as if it's taken me 30 years to really understand that scale and work within that scale. This is my son and my stepmother's two children in the living room that I grew up in. I was not satisfied with this. They were very stiff. When you're inside, and this is another thing, photographing inside with a view camera it was not done. Nobody had really done it because technically it's very difficult to do. You need a lot more light with a view camera. I didn't have any lights. I didn't know how to do them, so I had to ask people to hold still. And then I made this photograph called Sunday New York Times. I knew this family. They lived where I live in the summer resort. They were crazy, fun, uninhibited, kooky family. They knew what a view camera was. They didn't laugh when I came into a room with it. They didn't stop and alter their lives. They didn't pose for the camera. I did ask Michael to sit at the head of the table because I wanted the father to be at the head of the table. And I was interested in the fact that I thought how difficult. Now, I was 28 years old here, and I don't know why I was so serious at 28, but I really felt I knew it was hard to get a family to sit in one place for just 5 minutes. And so here I was directing them to do that. They're reading the Sunday New York Times, the phone's ringing, the balls are bouncing around. And I have to ask them to hold still, so I'm yelling 1,000, 2,000, which is the amount of time the lens has to be open. And yet some people moved and some didn't. This photograph changed my career, I could say, because the Museum of Modern Art showed this in a show in 1983 called Big Pictures by Contemporary Photographers. I had never shown my work publicly before, and this photograph got in that show and was exposed to the public for the first time. And that's how I began sort of my whole entire photographic life, from that one photograph. This is the graham cracker box, also taken in 1983. We'd gone to play tennis. Many people started to ask me if I had a production designer help me design these sets, because the colors are so harmonious that people couldn't believe that the walls and the tablecloth and the graham cracker box and the boy in the red shirt and the phone that's red were accidental, and that just happened to be there. So then I started wanting more narrative. I'm thinking about the relationship between children and their parents, and how bringing up my children in Sun Valley, Idaho, they never had to stand up when an adult came into the room. And that kind of tradition out the door for life. The fact these two boys are wearing ties, and the quintessential stock market father. So you can see I'm posing them. And then the next step, because of these stepping stones that happened to me in my whole photographic career, is someone started teaching me how to use lights. So instead of walking out of the door clumsily with this tripod and the view camera by myself, I'm walking out the door with 7 bags of equipment. I have to, now I'm still doing this by myself at this point. Eventually I had an assistant. What that meant was better lighting and better resolution. What I was afraid of is that was going to ruin the spontaneity of the pictures. But I started directing even more so, and it got me things that I just couldn't get before. Now, this picture it's called Jill and Polly in the Bathroom, and it's on the cover of my book, Theater of Manners. What this picture, oops, sorry, I want to go back. What this picture does is there are a lot of things that are compared to 17th century Dutch painting. First of all, this line here brings the eye again into the center of the photograph to look at Jill. Then I tweaked this brush. I turned it. Now this is all in seconds. Boom, 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 fast, because everybody wants to go out and do something else. This is very Dutch. There's something called the punctum. They're things that tweak the eye of the viewer. The viewer is unconscious of these things happening. Then there's this very strong line of the mirror coming down here. I call it a mark. Again, the viewer doesn't know this, is bringing your eye into the center. What's the most important? Here's the radiator. There's repeated by the fence out here. You brought your eye is brought with the doghouse here. And Polly, the movement of Polly is what makes the picture believable. Otherwise, it would be too stiff. And then I photographed my sister again. You see, she changes in each picture. Her hairstyle changes, her weight changes. This is at her wedding. This is at my aunt's house where I grew up. I knew that this Picasso painting was on the wall. I knew the colors of the walls were spectacular. Her daughter's friend, Andrea, is sitting here. And I could have asked Andrea to get up and leave because, as in theater, you don't want the back of someone to be facing the viewer. It blocks the entry of the eye of the viewer into the work of art. But I say to myself, this is all in seconds. I'm trying to look nice. I'm dressed up. I'm by myself, film backs between my legs. I've got a light on top of the camera. I'm not bringing the 8 bags of equipment in here. But I say, okay, Andrea's hair matches these walls. I like that. And what will give the entry is this sort of Fontana-type slit in her dress that breaks up what would have been a white block if that slit hadn't been there. Jill got up just by accident. But notice this beautiful Skazi dress. You can see through the legs. There's purses here, the hands. But look at this. Here's the angel. Same dress. Hands here. Halo. Hat. flowers between the ears, Picasso painting, hands, hands, 3 apples, 3 people. Now, I couldn't have planned that in 50 million years. I'm almost in a state of coma as I'm doing this. I'm going bam, bam, bam. I've got to get out of there so I don't look clumsy. I don't want to ruin the wedding. I only, in looking at the contact sheet when I get home 2 days later, start to choose and see what is best. Then I start working with lights more and more. And the lighting of my pictures has become, I almost think that assistants should get 50-50 credit when I take a picture, that they do 90% of the work and I do 10. If the lighting isn't good, the picture falls apart. But for the first time, I start putting a lighting, for instance, in this closet. Look at this space that I loved in the seersucker suit happening here, this wonderful little slit. Look at this string here that's going through the father's hand. Pick it up. I want the father to look if he might be touching the daughter. And this wonderful color and this magical, beautiful child. This is called Marinas Room. And I went on to photograph Marina until she was 18 years old. Here she's 7 years later. Same bedroom, vertical. I'm using an 8x10 camera this time, but nobody notices that but me. But it's formally, when you see the real picture, a little bit more, the resolution's a little better. And then when she's 18. Same bedroom, vertical, father beaten to death with a beautiful 18-year-old daughter. She's smoking. She's gorgeous. And these 3 pictures have been written about a lot. A guy named, I'll think of his name in a minute, wrote about these 3 pictures and compared them. I then started putting myself in the pictures, which is, I realized that the self-portrait, when you look at the history of art, is usually the most important work that an artist does. I'm not comparing myself to Van Gogh or someone like that, but I'm interested, and I thought, okay, I got to put myself in the picture. Technically, it's a pain in the neck. How do you focus with a view camera? How do you focus? Well, it's just a stab in the dark, but then you get what I call the gift. The gifts that I either stepped on my son's foot, which I probably did, that make this wonderful kind of, it looks like a sort of a Luca della Robbia kind of marble tonda, this shape of both of us with the black background. This is the Sunday New York Times family. I go back again, another summer. I never bothered anybody more than once a summer. I also set up goals for myself. I wanted to get closer to the families, closer to the people, actually. I wanted them to fill the frame of that 5-foot photograph. I squished these 2 guys in there. One of the narrative I had in my mind is I thought that men didn't pay enough attention to their wives. Here was this beautiful woman, and I thought, here are these 2 guys. They're thinking about golf or the dog. They're going in a different direction. John Tchaikovsky, the great director of photography at MoMA, bought this photograph after he bought Sunday New York Times. He called me on the phone, and I said, John, what did you like about this picture? And he said, it was the peaches and cream quality of this young woman when you see the real print that he just loved. That means he liked one little tiny thing enough to purchase the photograph. This is called Tim, Phil, and I. Beautiful lighting, teenage sons, asking my son, how many beers have you had? Here's the gift. Phil, either again, got a mosquito bite, burned himself, but look at this wonderful gesture, 1 in a million, that to me makes the photograph believable. And this is what people couldn't understand. 5-foot photograph, beautiful quality, people. When I teach in Germany, and I would travel talking about these pictures, and the Germans are the most interesting to me, the most brilliant photographers always, and the most interesting students. And the German students have said to me, Ms. Barney, how do you do this? And I said to them, you just got to get casual. The Germans are so specific, so precisionistic, that they would never let something as casual as that happen. And of course, I asked this guy to sit here, because again, I wanted the entry of the viewer to come out and to go through the picture, to go in to give depth and to make it believable. These 2 are in Sunday New York Times. Now, in the book Theater of Manners, you can leaf through the book, you can go back and say, oh, look, there's George when he was a baby. Here he is grown up. I was influenced by Thomas Ruf at this time. Thomas Ruf, German photographer, would make 5-foot photographs and have one face fill the whole span of that 5-foot photograph. And you know how, like, when you see fashion, you say, I want to do that too? Well, I wanted to do that too. I made a vertical. I used a bigger camera, the 8x10, and so George's head is 5 feet. In 1990, I made this picture called The Boys, and I'm telling you, Germans love this photograph. What it was about is this was the yuppie period. These were the Ralph Lauren blazers. These were the sort of children that came up out of the sort of the next sort of generation of families that weren't really old families, but wanted them to look like the old families of the East Coast. And then I started finally going out of the house. I was tired of it. I started going into other places. This is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is my brother. It's called The Trustee and the Curator, my brother in green, Larry Cantor, the great curator on the right. Someone was changing a light bulb in this set, in this sort of wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I thought, you know, I'm going to leave that there, that ugly aluminum cherry picker changing the light, because I wanted to mimic the diptychs of Italian Renaissanceian paintings. Now, this is the other kind of thing a German photographer would never do. Those are my wires of my lights, because I'm so fast moving and so excited about what I'm doing that I didn't get rid of those. Today you would have photoshopped them. But look at this wonderful two scenes that are going on. Look at the weirdo Magritte type. What is that doing there? Why is it empty with a great painting above? But here's the gift. Larry, this little finger, God knows where he was going, that looked like the Puzzi in some of these paintings. And there's something I'm also very interested in is that there's a difference in scale when you see this photograph in real life that makes Larry look bigger than Philip. And that's something that happens spatially in photography that's inexplicable to me. Here I'm trying lighting myself. It's Thanksgiving. I'm barging in on my friend Sheila's Thanksgiving dinner. I'm clumsily carrying the lights, the umbrellas. Ordinarily, you'd need 3 assistants to do this. And what happened, which was a mistake, another gift with my clumsiness that I think is a gift, is that Moya and Rand are in silhouette, which I really like. It's sort of, you know, I go to a lot of theater. I go to performance art. I'm influenced by so many different things I can't tell you. It goes on and on and on. And I'm not imitating, but they influence me. They give me ideas. And the lighting on a stage where you've seen many plays, Death of a Salesman, Sam Shepard's plays, in which there's scenes going on, and because of the lighting, you get these little narratives going on. And that's what I wanted to do. We have Sheila over here with her sister, one little scene here, John blowing his nose, Amy that I wanted to monumentalize. It's called The Thanksgiving. And so I had to somehow show my relationship with my sister, very hard to do. One of the things when you photograph yourself and you want to show a relationship with two people is, do you have them looking at each other, or do you have them looking into the camera? Well, if they're looking at each other, it's not interesting. And I just think this turned out, there's something very beautiful and abstract by the colors and the out-of-focus background that happens. In 1996, I was really getting tired of photographing at home, and some friends suggested I go to the American Academy in Rome, which takes visiting artists, besides getting a prix de Rome, which I did not want to go to the effort of doing. And I had 2 Italian friends. I started off in Rome. This is not Rome. Never knowing this project would take 8 years and take me to 6 countries. So this is from England. I had a friend that knew a young man that went to Eton, driving through Windsor and seeing your first Eton boy dressed like this. At every day they wear these tails. Very, very hard to believe. It is not a set from Downton Abbey. It is real. Now, what happened when I went to Europe is I thought I was going to direct people and do what I did in America, and I realized very quickly there was no way I was going to tell these people what to do. And what was more interesting, which was very hard for me to do, was to let them be and to examine the way they decided to hold themselves, which I believe, again, was handed down from generation to generation, more so in Europe, because of the tradition of having your portrait made. That I don't think, you can challenge me on this later, I just don't think we have that as much in America. Today we might, but not as much. 1 in a million. Look at that boy's face, and when you see the print, I'm sorry we don't have it here, the texture of his skin and the hair. This picture of the Orange Room is in Austria. I found friends in Austria, a lovely Austrian girl that was my assistant. This was a friend of hers. This wall, I said to everybody yesterday, the walls are fabric, orange fabric, and that's why when you see the photograph, the saturation of the orange is so extraordinary because it wasn't paint, it's fabric. This is in England. This is a very fun, amusing woman. This picture is called the Red Sheath. It was everything I could want. She was totally uninhibited. The apartment was crazy and nutty. This is in the show in the other room, father and sons. This is in Italy. And these are all 5 feet. This is in Vienna. Very wonderful house in the country. The family was having a birthday. This girl was making the flowers. And I really like this picture a lot and haven't shown it a lot because it's very different from the other pictures. It sort of looks Austrian or secessionist to me in some way. I don't know why. Oops, I got to go back. And this is here. This is called the Ancestor in England, in a castle very much like Houghton Hall, where the family let visitors come into the house, but they live in the private section. We were invited to lunch. That's the ancestor of the man in the background and his butler. And these pictures are much, the resolution and the focus of these pictures are much better than I'd ever made before, mostly because these people are standing still. In the past, for all those 30 years, I was directing everybody, and the minute you start moving, the photograph is not as much in focus. So the quality, people call it quality, but really it had to do with the focus. It's better than I'd ever done before. So this is the young woman on the left that helped me in Vienna. I had never met her before, and this angel child of a young woman picks me up at the airport and says, "Do you mind if we photograph my family tonight? My grandmother's funeral's tomorrow, but they don't mind if you come over." And I thought, oh, I think that's weird, but that's fine with me. She forgot to tell me one thing, that the house she lived in was designed by the great secessionist designer Joseph Hoffman, and every single solitary inch of that house was Joseph Hoffman. And it's one of the situations in Europe where I would walk in and it was all I could do to not have a heart attack, because it was so beyond my dreams that I barely could control myself to do what I have to do to take a picture. These walls were stenciled by Joseph Hoffman. The sconces are by Joseph Hoffman. Her family was so beautiful, very sophisticated sort of Austrian family. This is in Spain. This is the family, the Gué family, who are the great patrons of Gaudí. I was upstairs photographing this man's brother and wife. They were very, very stiff. And while I'm photographing, I'm saying, I'm not going to get anything out of this. This is really boring. This is bad. The man I'm photographing says, "You know, my brother's downstairs having his bust sculpted." And I almost did a pivot, and I said, "Okay, see you later." I'm downstairs, and this is what's happening. But the thing that turns me on is this door was leather. And there's something about that and the strangeness of this man's face that was so interesting. Another, like 1 in a million, I'm in a beautiful kind of castle in Padua, Italy. And this man owns this house. Why is this frame on the wall without anything in it? And look at his gesture and look at him. The daughters, this is in France. Very popular picture. I think it's because the woman's pretty. No, I really do. And the colors. And I love this picture called The Hands. African hands there, the boy, the father, the painting behind, the great square. Look at this chair and the repetition of the square here. You know, I get these things from Jan Groover, is a great photographer who was a still life photographer, and I made a film on her, and the way Jan used still life. So those are the little things of influence that seep in when I'm quickly, frantically photographing these kind of situations. You know, how did I meet a matador? I told everybody yesterday a friend of a friend knew someone that knew a matador in Spain. The thing that's interesting about him, I think, is his look, his attitude. His coloring is not what I would think of as one of a matador. This fabulous woman, her apartment really, the walls were chartreuse, so in the photograph it doesn't come out. But you know, here are the things that are interesting to me. The graphics of this and this. And those marks are so strong. they really make a huge difference, especially when you back up. And this wonderful girl that I talked about yesterday, and the glance that she gives, and this expression on her face of someone that age that has a presence of herself that I really find hard to find, that people, most people look into the camera when their picture is being taken, and they're looking at the camera for the sake of their picture being taken, and then other people like this girl, like Jill, like Sheila, something else is happening. And I read once that Betty Davis had the ability to look right through a camera, through the lens, out the other side. I think these people do that. They know who they are, and there's nothing sort of making them be something else. Then I went to China. 2006, I took 1 year of communicating with someone that helped me find people. I wanted to get there because I'd been there in 1983. And I knew so much was happening so fast there, I had to get back to Beijing and Shanghai before it was ruined. I think I was too late, but there were a couple of things I found. I've been told, because I love golf, that the caddies in China are women, and they wear these weird hats. But what's very strange is this background of all these horrible new buildings. And I feel as if it almost looks like there's a mural or a stage set in back of them. This was an opera student, and you can't see this, I don't think, in here, but he was wearing this very strange plastic thing that went around his mustache and tied onto his ears like eyeglasses. And it was to get him into the role, and then he started making sounds that came out of his voice. I don't know if any of you have heard classical old Chinese opera, but it is a sound like Meredith Monk almost that is from another planet. I wanted to show everybody the editorial work and the fashion work I've been doing all along that no one had ever seen unless they follow these magazines. This book is called Players. I have a friend named Chip Kidd who's a well-known book designer. He designed this book for me. It's my favorite. People did not understand it. They didn't know. They couldn't figure out what it was about. For instance, this is what Chip did. I've done many different projects. I photographed theater for quite a long time. I got connected to the Worcester group. They let me get on the stage. They performed for me with my lights. I got to photograph the play. Here's a play, oops, sorry. Here's the play on this side called Dames at Sea. Here's the woman. This is the family commission on the right, but Chip designed it so it looks like the curtain's opening and the scene is behind it. This is a family commission, which I do very rarely. Most of the time, it doesn't interest me. This time, I'm setting up the lights. The mother says, oh, my sister has a boa, and I didn't hear the word constrictor. So I thought that the girl was going to come out with a boa around her neck. And look at the incredibly conservative apartment. And the dress she chose to wear, she's wearing motorcycle gloves, and it was fun. So there's Dames at Sea, the one which I love. I wanted to do something weird. I wanted people to say, okay, what is this about? I was so kind of tired of doing the family, the sort of, I wasn't getting turned on anymore. So here's the book. This is what Chip did. And I've never gotten back to him because he's a very busy man. When you ask a friend to do a favor, you can only ask so much. I literally gave him the pictures, never told him one single thing about what those pictures were. Not one thing. 2 months later, he comes back and he gives me the layout. I never have known, and I've got to one day ask him, did he plan the juxtapositions of the things that he did? I'm sure he did. He's too much of a designer. I photographed the Big Apple Circus. This is the ad campaign for Theory Clothes. This is just a picture at our beach that we go to and the weirdo outfit this boy is wearing. This is a fashion shoot, but look at the blues. Blues here. And the arms. I love this book. This is Polly at her wedding. Oops. Polly at her wedding here on the right, Jill helping her with a veil. But this is the great Richard Forman, one of the most far-out weirdo avant-garde theater directors. This is cotton coming out of this girl's mouth to mimic this. They look, you know, oh, I love this book. And then I flipped in pictures like this. I worked for W Magazine for years for a brilliant guy called Dennis Friedman, who would ask fine art photographers to do editorial jobs that were so exciting and so much fun. He let us do whatever we wanted. And This is Leo Castelli at the age of 90 with his 35-year-old wife, and went to this apartment I can say it now because so much time has gone by. I hope she's not in the room. Very bland, nothing apartment. But, oops, sorry, Liechtenstein, accident. A friend of mine asked me if I had a wind blower to do that to her hair, and I said, come on, you know me better than that. She did that. People don't see the cat until after a while. But how about this and that? Jasper Johns, two weirdo people. Starn Twins, portrait of Castelli, Frank Stella rug, pretty good for, and people love this photograph. MoMA bought this photograph. And then this is a wonderful picture, another W shoot. This happens to became an actress called Paz de la Huerta, who was in Boardwalk Empire, but here she's a teenager before all that happened. But you know, this structure of, very interesting to me, very interesting, and the mother. Michael Stipe, most people, a lot of people don't know who that is, but I did an editorial, and he and I met. He loves photography. We became friends, but look at the kind of things he does that most people wouldn't do. This is a whole shoot with W Magazine where I photographed the billionaires of Mexico City. This is a theater company called Target Margin, because most theater companies, I was so naive, I thought I could go to theater companies and get them on the stage. I met someone very connected to Broadway. I forgot about the unions. No way in a million years. So I could only go to production companies. This is the Worcester Group, who I photographed for years, and one of the most thrilling experiences ever. I compare it to skiing in the finest powder you've ever seen in your entire life. Of when I would see the play, I'd go back, I'd write down things I like, I'd go back with the 50 million bags of equipment, wires, power packs, umbrellas, assistant, get on the stage. The Worcester Group stage has tracks of things flying out of nowhere, monitors. Then you've got Willem Dafoe, who at that time was a superstar, and trying to forget that it's Willem Dafoe. And then I got these insane photographs that I absolutely love. This is Target Margin, another theater group. And this is a fashion shoot. I got in the stretch limo to photograph these two guys. Elton John bought this photograph. He liked it. Actually, his husband bought it for him. We can see why. This is for a magazine called Homme Vogue International, and the scout went out on the streets of Brooklyn and found these kids, totally unknown, to model. They were so terrified, they were so hard to photograph because they were frozen when we got to the shoot. So these are Tom Ford tuxedos. The girl, of course, was terrific. She was totally together, and she loosened up the whole thing. And then I started a project called Small Towns. The hardest thing of all is to keep pushing, to keep finding a new project. After photographing for millions of years, it's very hard to find something new. Keep in mind, each project I've done has been 30 years, 8 years, Small Towns, 7 years. 7 years because it's so rare for me to get a picture that interests me. So Small Towns is about the traditions and rituals and people that live in the town in Rhode Island near where I live. And I decided not to go any further than an hour. But this is a bridal shop, a parade, a fair. Agricultural fair. Renaissance fair, which I've never seen before. Strangest thing I've ever come across. But all along for all these years, again, the idea of tradition and ritual, the things that are handed down. Why people go to a Civil War reenactment, I find out that is handed down from generation to generation. On a 90-degree summer day, people are sitting in those clothes. They tell me they've spent all their money. It's like a bad habit. Finding vintage clothes, reenacting. I find that absolutely fascinating. But I love this photograph. Look at this woman that looks like she comes out of, you know, a Renoir painting, really, or a masterpiece there. I love this picture. I mean, this is a felt costume made by hand that this girl and her family all, you know, collect. They're so proud of it. So it really kind of fits into the things that have always, you know, interested me. And then this is the last show I had in October. I've been all this time collecting photographs in black and white that I've been doing all these years. I've never felt confident enough to show them, but they really were deep in my heart. I really wanted to take pictures that were strange, that had a sort of Bergman, strange, surreal kind of, La Dolce, who's the great Bertolucci, or Italian, you know, classic photo of film. And for instance, I made this picture almost 7 feet. But there's a strange kind of ambiguity of scale that has always interested me. I wanted them to be sort of Twilight Zone. And this picture interests me very much. I mean, all these things, these are so, that's that line, this is in focus. There's an ambiguity again of space. This almost, to me, the back room there looks as if, you know how in old movies they have the fake scene going on behind? It looks like there's a screen with this fake, and I think it's because it's out of focus. And then the print, this print upon this print. And then when you look at the real print, this is in clear focus down here, going through here, and those are the things that I've always loved. This is very strange, this black wall. And then what happens here, and this is with an 8x10, so the focus and resolutions down here is really beautiful. I made this almost 7 feet too. I love this. These are bad reproductions, but they really interest me. And what's happening right here with these hands, this sort of all the goo and the peanut butter and the jelly and the... Thank you very much. Let me just finish by saying what interests me about black and white and color is I really think that, that the viewer thinks differently about when they look at something black and white as opposed to color. And there's something very, I haven't figured it out, but it interests me enough to keep doing it. So thank you very much, and I hope you have lots of questions. I'm here for a second only. Yes?
In the era of selfies, I'm working with kids. I'm trying to teach them about photography. What some advice do you have for young people to get them to understand photography?
I'll tell you right away, because I was talking to some people about this, some teachers. You've got to make a print. Because so much is being done now on the computer, and I teach. And everybody thinks their work looks fantastic on a monitor because it's backlit, like the old slides were. Whenever something's backlit, and if you have retina display, even more so, it looks fabulous. And then you make a print, and the letdown is incredible, but that's the reality. Unless your work, the final product of your work is going to be on a monitor. But I think they should, this is me, maybe I'm old-fashioned, I think that you should make a print. Even if it, I don't know if you can make a print from an iPhone, I bet you can't. I bet it looks terrible. I'm sure it does. But anyway, I think they should try to make a print. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the use of selective focus? I know the use of view cameras, so you have swing shift tilt abilities. Say a little bit about that.
Well, I call the camera a machine. It is, I don't know what a Formula One racing car is, but I have a friend who does, and I know that it's the height of complexity in a machine, or let's say a spaceship. It's not just a black box with a glass behind it and a lens. It has something called movements. Other cameras, the lens, and the film don't move. I'm not going to make you go into a coma with boredom about this, but this means okay, see these flowers here? That means with that camera, I can make the flowers in front go out of focus and the flowers on top be in focus. That, you know, photography is about focus. That's what it's about, or that's what at least turns me on. That means you have 10 million thousand more choices with the camera I use than you would with another camera. The problem with me is the speed in which I work, which is very unusual for using that machine. And so a lot of times it's hit or miss, but what's important is something has to be in focus. And you've got to really examine the prints to see, my choice. And one of the sort of disappointments I have is that most people have no idea. They don't look at that. They don't get up close. This is one of the things, this is a very complicated question because the invention of digital has changed that whole problem. It's a problem, or it's a question. And this is very interesting if you don't know it. It took me a while. Where you stand to look at a photograph, when you look at a 19th century, 1800s photograph, most of the time, if you're lucky, is up here, or it should be, without glass. And if you saw that Civil War show at the Met, you could see it. The quality of focus, because they all use big cameras, is so supreme. It's like looking at a great, great Dutch painting or a great Cimabue or a Duccio, great Italian painting. The focus is so supreme. Okay, 19th century. As the photographs get bigger, me, Cindy Sherman, you name it, step back, like your big TV. How can your eyes, I don't think even a good eyes, you can't see that resolution because they're standing back to see the whole big thing. So the whole idea of seeing that beautiful resolution is dying, literally dying in our history. Now, you get digital. People are not looking up close anymore. Go look at the Houghton Hall photographs that they made, the digital prints of their interiors. And this is one of the many things that I didn't even tell Susan about that's so interesting. Is you look at my view camera pictures and then you go look at the digital prints of Houghton Hall, I bet you if you took a survey, an awful lot of people would not notice that there's a big difference. Go up to those Houghton Hall pictures. It's pixelated. It's pointillism like you can't even believe. And so that focus is gone. So anyway, let's just say it's changed a lot. The focus is very important to me. It's something that frustrates me and also pleases me very much. Sorry that it takes so long to answer that. Yes? Can you stand up? Is that okay? Does that make you faint?
When I first walked into the larger room, I looked at the boy first on the right, and then when I turned around, it was very confrontational, and it felt like everyone in the photographs were staring, at least one person in the photographs were all staring at you. And then there was a very confrontational feeling, a very abrasive feeling, like particularly with the scale that you chose to print these at. Some of them were life size, some of them were larger, with the man with the ancestors in the background, with his two younger boys in the background. There was a certain confrontational presence for me that was a lot different than the smaller room. The smaller room, the body language was a lot more passive, and it seemed like some of the stares were less pensive or less questioning of why are you here. Was that your intention, or perhaps the curator's way of presenting this in the gallery?
I actually don't know if Susan intended that. I did not notice that. But what's interesting about your feeling like that way is that everybody has their own kind of impression of any art that they look at. I definitely didn't intend that, and I've never intended any kind of confrontation. The reason I made the pictures big is so that the viewer could see everything in that space, be invited into that space. I was hoping for not necessarily a warm feeling, but just the opportunity to come and look into these situations that are so unusual, so extraordinary. I think the confrontation could come from a lot of times that the eye of the subject is looking right at you because they're looking at the camera, and that might be something. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but that might be some of the confrontational feeling that you're feeling.
I think it was more some of their body language, the placement of the photographs, like the placement of their eye level compared to ours, like some of them were looking down on us, some of them were larger than us. Just the feeling
Oh, okay. Good, thank you.
When you were photographing the Europeans, do you stay with the people that, or do you have a remote relationship with them? Or?
Well, everybody asked me that question. I think, I can't remember, very few of them I stayed with, but the relationship varied. Most of the time, though, which people are surprised about, I did not know those people before I got there. I spend rarely more than an hour, and sometimes I never see them again. So it's pretty remote, but the thing that's important is that the friend that introduced me to them is their good friend. And it showed this amazing trust and interest. They knew nothing about contemporary art or contemporary photography, and what's really interesting, and I feel so lucky for, is they never come and found me again to say, what's happening to these pictures, where are they? I give them all a print, which is, you know, and a book, but it's just, I've been really lucky, because can you imagine if all those people, and if my family are really uninterested, which is really great, can you imagine if they all wanted me to tell them whenever something was happening? I mean, it would be never ending. So it's a very funny kind of, it is impersonal in a funny way, and yet very personal in another.
Boy, I have a lot of questions.
Oh.
You mentioned that you rarely accept commissions, and I did want to ask you, do you ever go in to those commissions feeling as if you are compromising your vision? And how many times have you might have been concerned with, after having shot, how the people would perceive the final? And then one other, do you ever worry about models?
Every single person I photograph, I have a release for, and I think I am the only photographer that has ever done that I know. And I'm having a book published by Rizzoli now, and they asked me about that. It's the first time I've been asked, because the other publisher I've been using, Stipe, couldn't care less. But I started getting kind of guilty feelings, and this is way before the internet, and I'm really glad I did it. I also want to say that in the last 1 or 2 years, it has become so difficult for me to get permission from people to photograph that sometimes I get so discouraged I think I'm going to give up. And this is not only people I know, but strangers, because strangers now are much more interesting to me. And I cannot tell you, I could never have done what I did in these last years now, and it all has to do with the internet. And you can relate to that, and you can understand that, because someone can trust me, but after it leaves my hands, an awful lot can happen. So, to go back to the commission, I kind of don't want to shoot myself in my foot, because I do those commissions really to pay room and board. I mean, I'm not kidding. I don't like them. Because, and I think if you went through the history of commissioned portraiture, don't want to compare myself to Michelangelo or Leonardo, but if you read about the history of art and commissioned art, it is always a pain in the neck, because the patron asks you to do what you want to, we want you to do, we love your work, we want you to do what you want to do, and then they start telling you what to do. And then, I've only once had a mother ask me if I could, and this is the invention of Photoshop her son's pimples or something. And that's where I want to give up. And then, what you have to realize now is this whole invention of Photoshop is so much ingrained in the present generation, the next, that people don't understand the extraordinary insult that is to me. I'm the one that's out of it, not them. This is the future. To alter is it. This is the way it is. The freedom to alter is going to be with us forever. To go back to the commissions, I really don't like them, because I'm not interested really in photographing family anymore. I've been there, done that. So that's one thing. And I also think if someone, really shooting myself in the foot, but I'll tell you all the truth. If someone is really interested in my work, they're not going to hire me to do a commission. They should be buying those. That's the thing. But there's an ego thing, and they think, oh, the other thing is, I'm telling you, it takes me 7 years to do one project, 8 years to do another. My ratio, I said yesterday, probably when I was doing all these theater of matter pictures, I would push myself. I wasn't taking enough pictures. 400 sheets of film, that's how it's called, 400 pictures. A year would be a lot, and I'd be happy if I get one. So how can you hire somebody to come over to your house in 1 hour and get what I call a winner? The chance is so, so, so slim. Girl with a Snake might be the only picture I've ever taken that was kind of funky like that, and fun, and interesting. I think, did I answer? Oh, right. Yeah.
I was interested, you said when you started off you were buying Ansel Adams photographs. Have you never been
One.
Oh, you only have
One.
I thought you had
No, one.
I'm just wondering whether you were never attracted to doing landscapes.
Well, I tried. It is so difficult. Too hard. Too hard. Very difficult. Out of my league. But you know, the human figure is so interesting to me. But it's that and architectural photography, too hard. I don't think I could ever do it. I'd be terrible at it.
I'm wondering, when you are in these situations, how many photos do you take of the people? And since you can't preview it, I'm guessing. And then how do you decide, how do you get it from the picture to the print when you're going to print it out?
You know, I usually have, as I've said, no matter what I've done, even fashion shoots, never taken more than an hour, which is hard to believe, but everybody gets tired. And I think most of the time I take about 20 sheets of film. If I take 30 or 40, there's something really wrong. I then go back, I get a contact print. I'm not going to tell you how that happens. That's truly boring, but you go to the lab, you bring the film to the lab, they process it, they make a contact. And then choose from that, then you go back to the lab, you have a negative, they make a print, I go sit there, they come out, and I say, oh, that's too blue, too pink, too yellow, and it goes on. So that's how that's done. Oh, okay, one more. Oh, yes. You know, I think that I think those theater pictures were really, really fun. And I have to tell you, doing fashion is really fun. I'm doing a fashion shoot next week. There's something really fun about it. Because it gives me all, you know, I don't have to go out and find the people and figure out whether the clothes are interesting or the sets. It's provided for me, and then I can do the things that I really like to do. One more pink hair.
I was just wondering what effect you think your art has socially, like issues of class, because I know that it's the revolutionary qualities that were naive, you did the Butler in the one image, and I'm just wondering, as the viewer, what kind of experience you want me to have
I want you to have.
with the inclusion of that figure.
First of all, I never thought about my pictures as far as class was concerned. This is what I know. This is what I'm familiar with. And I don't think about what the viewer is going to think or how I'm going to affect them. It's what interests me. And it's basically because it's what I know, that I didn't go out and think, okay, this is a funky, weird class, I'm going to go do it. It's really what I know. And so it's as simple as that. I was never making a comment in class. I was interested in just photographing what I knew and making an interesting picture out of the things that interested me. Very simple.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.